Peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, happy Monday. We got a lot to talk about. Let's talk about some of the great concerns that Black voters have with President Biden, how a New York Times conversation opened up kind of where we are in Black America. I'm going to share with you a little bit of what the Biden administration had to say about Black voter interest. We'll have that conversation. Also, let's talk about the RAP Act. This is the act that is going to where lyrics from artists can be used in criminal cases, possibly to incriminate themselves or other folks. So we'll have that discussion. Also, we got this week's Reclaim Your Wellness with Dr. Bridget, MD, and so much more. So stay with us. There's a lot going on in today's edition of The Culture right here on the Black Star Network. Let's go. All right, folks, welcome and peace and welcome to the culture here on the Black Star Network. I'm your host, Farajii. Thank you so much for tuning in and being a part of the conversation. Folks, happy Monday. Oh, man, what a day it is. Happy Monday, folks. We got a lot to talk about, so I want to get right into the conversation. And, folks, of course, no conversation is complete without you, so make sure you get ready to join us. Share your thoughts and your comments as you post them online on our Facebook page, as we're streaming right now on Facebook, on YouTube, we're streaming right there on the Roland Martin, and of course on Black Star Network and Amazon News. So make sure you follow us and find us and make sure that you keep up to date on all the latest news and information with Black Star Network. Let's jump right into this first conversation. The first one is about President Biden. Now that the president has officially announced that he is planning to run for re-election in 2024, there are now some very big concerns that Black voters have. And this is leading to some frustration that people see that is a real problem for the Biden administration. Now, we have talked about these issues time and time again, ever since this show started. And of course, Brother Roland has been talking about it on his show, Roland Martin Unfiltered. But now we're starting to see a rise of this, that this level of frustration might lead to some Black folks saying, I don't know if this is the guy. And so here's what I am throwing out, folks. Of course, I could be wrong because I'm human. But I think that what could possibly happen if enough Black folks aren't in line with what President Biden and his administration and what the Democratic Party is trying to do, that we may see not a shift to the Republican Party, but we might not see as much voter turnout. And this is the big concern. The Republican Party traditionally have always leaned on particularly marginalized communities and disenfranchised communities such as Black folks and Brown and Latino folks and Hispanic folks, for us to not come out in droves. And so we might see that. We might. I'm putting that big MIGHT word out there, folks. We might see that as it relates to President Biden. Here's why. Let me share with you what the New York Times have put out as they have talked to a number of Black voters in various places across the country, but they've talked to a number of Black voters about what they see is the big concern around President Biden. And this is a very valid question. So I don't want us to even get into an immature space of saying, oh, well, why are we even asking questions about President Biden? He's not Trump. I get that. But there are so many other facets to this administration. And there's so many more other things for us to really understand in terms of how high the stakes are, in terms of understanding what the real issues are, in terms of building a real relationship, right? Some people would say that the relationship needs to be healed. Some people would say that there was no relationship at all. And while other folks would say that we're in a good place in our relationship to the Democratic Party as Black people in this country, as Black America. But one thing is certainly for sure, we're not a monolith, right? Everybody says that. We're not a monolith. We don't all think the same way, right? But is that a bad thing? it really a bad thing if we were to start thinking along the same lines? It may not be the same way in terms of strategy, but is it a bad thing that we should start thinking along the same lines in terms at least of goals? And then if we can compromise, try to figure out, okay, does your strategy work? Has it worked? Has it been used before? Does my strategy work? Has it worked? Has it been used before? Thinking strategically about how we approach the end goal, which I believe a lot of us want there to be, which is political liberation, social, social advancement, economic prosperity, educational awareness, growth, and development. I mean, I think these are normal things, but there has to be a strategy. All right, here's what the New York Times have said, and this is not even quoted in not one of the quotes. Well, let me start with the quote that I do want to share with you. Here's, take a look. Let's put up quote 1, please, Kagan. This is from the New York Times. They said Mr. Biden's reelection bid, and his renewed pledge to achieve his first-term policy goals have forced some reflection and frustration among Black voters in background states. Many believe that the big promises he made to Black communities have fallen flat. Boom. Falling flat. I want us to keep this in mind, and crew, I would love to hear from you. Post your comments on Facebook and YouTube. I'm streaming right now. Falling flat. Do you feel like his promises that he made to the Black community have fallen flat? All right, that's interesting. Okay, let's go to quote number 2, and then we're going to take our first pause. Mr. Biden, he says this, folks. Mr. Biden's allies maintain that his administration has delivered for Black voters, but that he has failed to trumpet some of his progress. Since taking office, he has provided billions of dollars for historically Black colleges and universities, and he has appointed more Black judges, including Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson, to the federal bench than any other president. Black unemployment is at a record low. The economy, a top concern for Black voters, has recovered from its pandemic doldrums, though inflation, which spiked last summer, remains higher on a sustained basis than it has been for decades. According to the spokesperson for Mr. Biden's campaign, Mr. Kevin Munoz, he said the president and vice president have made issues Black Americans care most about a priority and are running to finish the job. The campaign will work hard to earn every vote and expand on its winning 2020 coalition. I want to let that sink in. We're going to take a first pause. When we come forward, we're going to continue the conversation. I want to let that sink in, folks. Do you see that this is laying out the groundwork for the president to finish the job? Or are we looking at another situation where these frustrations, I'm going to share with you more of what the Times and what the White House had to say, and even what some voters had to say. Share your thoughts and opinion as we talk about Black voters frustrated by President Biden. Stay with us. The conversation continues right here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
When you talk about Blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The
Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We are talking about President Biden, and we're talking about his relationship with black voters. As their New York Times piece came out that says that black voters are frustrated by the president, and it leads us to ask some of the big questions. Do you agree with this assertion? Now, this is based on not just some writer going out and just making some assumptions. This is based on conversations with black voters from across the country. Discussions about where they see the president fitting and in pushing the agenda for black folks further along. And the White House has put it out there that the president is doing some things, that the president and vice president, black interests are at the top of the priority list. We are doing some things, and they made it clear. Oh, we put a black woman in office. We're appointing federal judges. We're working on a number of different projects, right? And we're including black folks into the national conversation around a host of things, whether it's about police reforms or whatever the case may be. So, okay, but does this do enough? Is this enough for you? Is this enough for me? Is this enough for us to go to the polls and feel like, you know what, President Biden, you are doing your thing? Now, they spoke to one gentleman. His name is Travis Williams, who is a Democratic organizer in Dorchester County, South Carolina. Mr. Williams said, quote, folks are just tired of being tired. They're just sick and tired of being tired and disappointed whenever our issues are never addressed. Yeah, absolutely. Here's the big issues that haven't been fully addressed that I think a lot of black folks would say. And this is according to polls. They're finding that black voters' biggest policy priorities, and you tell me if this is a priority for you, crew. Stronger federal protections against restrictive voting laws. Okay, so the whole voting rights issues big. Student loan debt relief, criminal justice and police accountability measures. And they have all failed. According to the New York Times, they said those three issues have failed or stalled, some because of Republican opposition, and some because Democrats have declined to bypass the Senate's filibuster rules. Those disappointments, highlighted in interviews with more than 36 black voters, organizers, and elected officials in recent weeks, leave open the question of just how enthusiastic Democrats' most important group of voters will be in 2024. Just those three issues: voting laws, student loans, and criminal justice and police accountability measures. Are these the top three for you? I want you to think about that, share your thoughts with me, and then let's go to what you're going to have to say. And then I'm going to bring in my guy, Dr. Jason Nichols, who's joining us in a few moments. Samuel, you checked in and said, Samuel Gilly, I appreciate you for joining us this afternoon. You said, why should he care about black issues when he has their vote no matter what? Does he? I mean, that's the purpose of this. And I think I understand the tone and the spirit in which you're saying, and Samuel's saying that regardless of how frustrated we are, we're naturally just going to vote Biden because we don't want to see, if Trump is back, we wouldn't want to see a Republican. So it's like we're already giving our vote. Maybe this is a mute conversation. I don't think it is. I don't think it is. I think you have another generation of young voters who are looking for something different, who might be the big pendulum swinging in a different way. You have younger voters talking to older voters, right? Who are saying, mom, dad, grandma, granddad, pop, auntie, uncle, he ain't doing it. He's just not doing it for us, considering everything. My student loans, dad. Or look what happened to Ray Ray when he got pulled over by the police. Or, your grandma got to walk all the way to, got to get a mile just to get a chance to vote. These conversations are happening in black households. Pauline, you checked in. Samuel, thank you. You said, Pauline, did the farmers ever get their money? What about the student loan? Did that ever pass? No. And I get it. Trust and believe. These are certainly real issues that we have to bring into the conversation. Black farmers getting that $5 billion, the whole nine. Let's throw out there the reparations conversation. How far is that moving under this administration? Question is, are these the issues that we going to set our foot in and dig in the grounds for? And then say to Mr. Biden, Mr. President, with all due respect, we appreciate you trying to do your best, but you're not doing enough. Or are we going to keep the ship running? Let me bring in my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, lecturer for the African American Studies Department for the University of Maryland. Doc, good to talk to you, brother. How are you this afternoon?
I'm blessed, brother. Good to see you.
I see you got your Ravens purple on.
Always. We'll see. I think we're gonna be good this year, bro. I think
that's a whole different conversation. We ain't got enough time.
Right.
Hey, look, real quick though. This take on this facts that you got a lot of black voters across the country who are frustrated with the president, and more importantly, are frustrated with the lack of promises being fulfilled. Those three: debt, student loans, policing, and accountability, dealing with the issue of voting rights. The president still has not been able to make any real big progress on those three things. Are those the three things that will hold Black America back from giving their vote to this president?
I think black folks are largely, particularly older black folks, are still going to vote with Joe Biden. I think Joe Biden's biggest obstacle is going to be young voters. Excuse me.
I said it. Yep.
And particularly, young voters of color, black and brown voters. I think, people want to see bold action, but I think one of the problems that this White House has made is that they've made these promises and they are trying to get them done when they really didn't have the ability to get them through the Congress. Particularly focusing on student loan debt, which was important, and they tried every avenue that they could get there with. Same thing with, I think it's going to be the same thing with abortion. At a certain point, people are going to be like, you're not getting it done. But I will tell you this. I think that there are lots of things that they could be marketing to black folks, and they're not accomplished.
And see, okay, so that's the point, though. That's the thing. Look, matter of fact, I'm going to take another quick pause. And Dr. Jason, I need you to explain this part to me, because that's exactly what the White House had said. That's in one of my quotes that I shared from this New York Times piece, is that they're saying they're not marketing it well enough. And I'm wondering to myself, is it because of marketing? I mean, because black folks, we learn about stuff in a lot of different ways. If you did something significant, it doesn't have to be marketed. It will stand on its own to be known, right? That's what I'm thinking. No? Maybe I'm thinking too idealistically. I don't know. I want to get your take on it, because if this is about marketing, then who better fit, or who is more able to have the resources to get the best PR campaign people in the world other than the White House, right? If it's about marketing, but if it's something about lack of fulfilling campaign promises,
I think it's both.
All right. Yeah. There you go. Let's take a pause, folks. When we come forward, more of a conversation about black voters' frustration with President Biden. What's your take on that as well? Is it about marketing? Is it about these promises not being fulfilled? We'll continue to discuss it with my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, and of course with you. Post your comments on YouTube and Facebook, and of course stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hatred on the streets, a horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
an angry pro-Trump mob stormed the U.S. Capitol.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We've been talking to Dr. Jason Nichols from the University of Maryland, and he is one of our great political contributors and analysts here on the Culture on the Black Star Network. You can also check him out, too, of course, on Roland Martin Unfiltered. And my brother was just breaking it down for me, because as we talk about black voters frustrated by President Biden, because even though he seems to be on the right track, there's still some key issues that the president has not been able to close the deal on that would truly secure him the vote of black voters across the board, but also will truly secure his legacy of pushing the conversation about civil rights, about economic prosperity, about social justice to the next level. And I want to bring my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, back into the frame. And Doc, you said that this is not about marketing, because let me post this again. Quote number 2, please, Keenan. Let's post it one more time for folks that don't know. But this is what the White House said. Mr. Biden's allies maintain that his administration has delivered for black voters, but he has failed to trumpet some of his progress. Let's stop that right there. If that's the case, I would fire everybody in the communications department, Dr. Jason Nichols.
I'm with
how does that come out from the White House saying that, you know what, we may not have touted our progress?
Listen, Farajii, you're gonna start me on a rant.
Hey, come on, man. Put your tennis shoes on. Let's go.
Listen, let me tell you something about how Trump handled things. Now, Trump had 0 pro-black policies, not one, not even that stupid repackaging of black capitalism that every president does, that he called opportunity zones. I mean, you look at that, it failed, and it only helped the wealthy business owners to put their businesses in those communities and bring the same outsiders from outside the community to work there. We have the lowest. Now, here's the thing. But Trump still said lowest black unemployment of all time. You know what I mean? How many times did we all hear that? We all heard lowest black unemployment of all time. Because he was good. Trump is good at marketing. He puts his name on all those buildings. That's one of the things he's really good at. This, I can also tell you, if we were Trumpers, if you and me were Trumpers, as you saw what's coming out in all these lawsuits, and I know a lot of the black people who were in the Trump orbit, those black Trump folks, They had strategy meetings. They got to go to the White House and meet the president. They would get text messages from high-level people in the Trump orbit. They actually, and of course, that made them feel like insiders. That made them, that actually helped them to strategize. And that's why they got their talking points directly from the White House. So when you would see one of them on CNN, they were literally getting their talking points directly from the White House. They would be in conference calls. They would get text messages. And again, they had some level of access to the president. Joe Biden doesn't do that. Joe Biden doesn't hit Farajii up. Not Joe Biden himself, but anybody in the White House. They don't reach out to Black-owned media or to Black media figures and say, hey, I know that you have 100,000 followers. Here's what we've been doing. Here's what we've been accomplishing. If you want to talk about it, you can. If you don't, you don't. Or invite you to the White House to meet the vice president and meet the president. They don't do that. And I'm telling you, that would help them because they're actually right. As much as, trust me, I was the biggest Biden hater in 2020. Anybody. I was major Biden hater, 100%. I would vote for Bernie Sanders if he ran again, and he's older than Biden, I think. But here's the thing. You don't hear about issues that actually are life and death, and the way that they market them is terrible. So, for example, they talk about climate change. Brothers don't know how climate change affects their lives.
No.
They're thinking about rising sea levels. They're like, well, how does that affect my life? And they hear about electric vehicles and all that. I'm not going to own an electric vehicle, so how does that affect me? But when that bus that you and I remember as kids would roll up in the neighborhood and it's got black smoke blowing out the top, your baby's breathing that. I just read a statistic from an MIT study in 2013. So you and I know, let's take Baltimore.
Right.
Baltimore is unfortunately a violent city. There's about 300 murders a year in Baltimore.
Right.
But guess what? This MIT study said that 800 people die every year in Baltimore City from pollution-related causes.
Bro, I can believe it.
So 3 times as many. This is the way you market to Black communities to care about climate change and about pollution and all of that. You talk about your bipartisan infrastructure bill, and I would be reminding Black people everywhere I went, this is getting rid of those lead pipes.
I see what you're saying.
You know what I mean?
I see what you're saying.
That are messing up your babies and making it so that they can't even learn and read and do all that and reach their full potential.
I see what you're saying.
Remember Freddie Gray? What was up with Freddie Gray? Freddie Gray had elevated levels of lead in his blood. He's not the only one in Baltimore City like that, or in Cleveland, or in Detroit, or in Atlanta.
Yeah.
These are the things that they need to talk about. And plus, what is the main cause that everybody goes to when they talk about, for example, the racial wealth gap? It's housing, right? It was redlining. It was all of that. They've got lots of policies about redlining. They've got policies that they've done about Black maternal death. You know what I'm saying? That's keeping our wives alive. You know what I'm saying? They've got policies that they put in place about home ownership and child care, which, trust me, is hella expensive. And a lot of Black families are struggling to be able to afford good child care. And I see what you're saying, Doc. I see what you're saying, bro, because you essentially are you're touching on making it relevant to people's lives. Right. Making sure that people understand that this is an issue. This is how this issue affects your quality of life. And this is what we're doing to address the issue. Making it connect the dots, making it relevant, right? Nicole, one of our lawyer watchers, she said, some people don't think about the correlation between environment, climate change, and how it affects their overall health and wellness. In the case you just brought up with Freddie Gray, growing up, I went to school in Baltimore City, public schools, lead in the water. That's been in there for years.
You know what I mean? I might have lead in me. You know what I'm saying?
I doubt it.
It's been that year because I've been drinking the water. But the fact is that making it that the connecting the dots for people is absolutely important. And it's no, let me just say this again. You're talking about the White House. You're not talking about some ragtag company. This is the federal government.
But they act like it. You know what I'm saying? They act like.
But look. Here's the thing, though, Doc, and we're going to take another pause. The thing is, even if they act like it, the issue of debt relief, policing, and voter rights, those are three big issues that lie squarely on the shoulders of the president and Congress. Because here's the other thing people don't understand, and this is going back to like social study, American government 101. You need Congress to pass laws. What I think black folks are looking for, at least from the president, is for him to use his bully pulpit to not leave any tool on the table to move the conversation forward. That's what it. Now, if you get blown up in the process, that's one thing. The president be like, look, man, I tried this, I tried that, I tried this, I tried that. I use every presidential power legally that I can use to get this thing done. That's a different conversation versus let's try to wait on the other side and let me try to appeal to their moral sensibility.
Right.
That's a totally different conversation. And I think black folks and even people in our chat are like, hey, man, I might not vote for the president. One sister said, Lynette, you checked in. You said that she said, I will never vote for Biden again. And I've been a Democratic voter for 56 years.
Mm-hmm. I hear it. I'm just going to say, you know, they do a really bad job. They need to fire everybody. They need to, you know, if we're going to, there's no doubt that policing is a big issue. Criminal justice is a big issue. You're not going to get any better from the other side, but I understand, like, you don't deserve my vote if you're not going to get at issues like policing. But what I'm saying is that there are other issues where our wives and our babies are dying.
I get that. Let me do this. Let me take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's talk about that because there are other issues on the plate, on the agenda that we have to address. Folks, stay with us. More conversations as we talk about black voters being frustrated by President Biden now that he has announced his re-election bid. And what does that mean? Folks, continue to join us in the conversation on YouTube and Facebook. And of course, stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Folks, Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punching!
I'm real revolutionary right now.
Support this man, Black Media. He makes sure that our stories are told.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America, Roland.
Stay black. I love y'all.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
Pull up a chair. Take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
We're all impacted by the culture, whether we know it or not. From politics to music and entertainment, it's a huge part of our lives, and we're going to talk about it every day right here on The Culture with me, Farajii Muhammad, only on the Black Star Network.
I'm Deborah Owens, America's Wealth Coach, and my new show, Get Wealthy,
focuses on the things that your financial advisor and bank isn't telling you, but you absolutely need to know. So watch Get Wealthy on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. We're continuing the conversation about Black voters being frustrated by President Biden and wondering if the president is going to come through on some of the big campaign promises that he made. Even though he said that he is working hard behind the scenes, we're just not seeing enough, especially considering the fact that Black folks are one of the key blocks of the Democratic Party and has essentially was able to get President Biden into office for 2020. Now, I want to bring my brother, Dr. Jason Nichols, into this. Here's the other thing. And we talked about it a little bit on the show. I think it was with you, bro, that I talked to us about that the way the primary season is going to be set up for this go around for the presidential election has changed. It has put South Carolina in the front as being the first election for the Democratic election season, making first primary. And so that's what Reverend, I said Reverend, he probably is a Reverend, James Clyburn down there in South Carolina, being down there, one of the president's closest advisors, one of the top surrogates in his campaign. They got a new sister down there that's running the state Democratic Party right in South Carolina. So Black folks are priming. I see the Democratic Party are trying to prime Black folks to get out and vote. But my thinking is you're going to have to appeal. And I'm talking about appeal. I mean, hell, I might be able to get President Biden on the show before 2024. You know what I'm saying? At this point. But there's going to have to be a serious appeal made to Black folks because I just don't see us coming together, even with Trump looming in the background, Doc. I just don't see Black folks rushing to the polls. I think we may see less Black folks, less voter engagement, rather than more Black folks for Biden.
Which again,
and I could be wrong, and I've been wrong before.
I think you're right, Farajii, but that doesn't make any sense to me. We're talking about voting rights. That's the whole thing we're talking about. So our answer is not to vote. Like that to me doesn't.
So it'd be different if we were actually voting for the protection of voting rights. We're voting for a candidate hoping that he will protect voting rights.
Well, I think honestly, if Black folks, if a large group of Black folks are not behind Joe Biden, let's put up another candidate. You know, and if it's a good candidate, I'll back him. You know what I'm saying? Honestly.
Right.
But the idea that, you know, we don't like Joe Biden and we don't like Trump, so we're going to be disengaged and we're not going to vote, then we're playing right into the people that want to take our votes away their plan. I have to keep reminding us, you remember what that guy said in Milwaukee. The whole thing was 37,000 fewer Black people voted. He was celebrating, spiking the football. So to me, you know, at the very least, number one, you have to vote down ballot. You want to know why your voting rights are getting taken away? It's because Republicans control state legislatures around the country. So they, you know, you can win overall in Georgia, you know, but the state legislature, super red. Same thing in a lot of these other states. You know, that's what makes what they did in Michigan so significant, where, you know, Democrats basically have, you know, a majority now. So I honestly think Joe Biden has done things for Black people. I decided when Joe Biden came in, I was going to give him a fair shot. That was my thing, because I was anti-Biden. You know what I mean? But I was more anti-Trump, of course.
Right.
Like, when he got inaugurated, especially after January 6th, I was like, I'm going to give this guy a fair shot. And as, you know, you and me in the media, we pay attention to the policy. We pay attention to what gets done. We pay attention to the agenda. We're not just looking at what the media says. And let me tell you something. The right-wing media touted everything Trump did. The left-wing media talks about all the bad things Trump does. You know what I'm saying? They don't talk
and scrutinizes the Democratic Party's approach.
Yeah, and they should. I think that's good. But
yeah,
they should talk about, first of all, Biden should have some allies in the media, and he doesn't have any. Not like Trump did. You notice, you saw all of those big-time hosts were texting Mark Meadows.
You talking about like Tucker Carlson?
Yeah,
Sean Hannity.
Sean Hannity, not so much Tucker, but Sean Hannity and Laura Ingraham, and those people were all texting Trump. You know what I mean? And texting, Don Jr., texting Mark Meadows.
Yeah.
Because they all kind of colluded together to make it sure.
And that in itself is, and bro, that in itself should be a major violation.
It should be.
And I think the reason that we may not see that level of engagement from the Democratic Party, because that in itself is a major violation. As a White House, you should not be texting, and here's the thing. This is a thin line that we got to walk as Black folks in media. Yeah. You in media, I'm in media, right? Mm-hmm. The thin line is that as much as we might, think that a policy is good or right, as much as we might personally like the candidate, we got to keep ourselves always in a position to keep some level of objectivity, so that way we can do the due diligence by the folks that watch us, that the folks that hear us, the folks that read our writings, some sense of accountability for these candidates. Because this is hard, man. This what's put Black media in the position that it's in, because this is not a big thing for white media. White media is just like, hey, we're going to do it. This is our guy. We see it with Fox News. It has become very, very profitable for them to take a side. With Black folks, that's not the case. Black folks is like, do we take a side, or do we stand on this other, do we create this other standard and then start to scrutinize, start to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Look deeply into a candidate or their policies and hold them accountable. We want accountability, man.
Right.
And I think that's the hard part about this whole process. I'm saying, as it relates to the relationship between the White House and the media.
So here's the thing. I agree with you. I don't think of primetime hosts as journalists. I think of them as entertainers, information entertainers. So, and that's what basically the way they put it out there. So if you're going to give your opinion, you give your opinion. But I'll say this, if the other side is wants to fight, right? Say you're about to fight a dude, let's take it back to, to old school Park Heights, to Farajii, you know what I'm saying?
Right. West Baltimore Farajii.
West Baltimore Farajii, right?
Right.
So if a dude is going to come show up and he's got brass knuckles, I'm going to be like, yo, you need to dip your hands in glue and glass, you know what I mean? And you got to be ready, because it's not a fair fight. They're not fighting fair, then you gotta have your allies as well, particularly in, not so much in the news media, which is that 9 or 10 to 5, which is like the news hours. You know what I mean? Those are when you have journalists. But once you get to those primetime shows, Sean Hannity's not a journalist, and he'll tell you that. He's like, I'm not subject to journalistic standards. This is the same thing in all their lawsuits, and all the Fox News lawsuits. They're like, we are not subject to journalistic standards because we're not journalists. We're opinion hosts. We give our opinion on politics. And if that's the standard that we're going with, and they're texting people in the government, which they can do because all of these hosts have connections in the government. You know what I mean? So they can get them on the show.
Huge.
Having that kind of relationship. They need to, whenever I watch any of these, I don't watch a whole lot of cable news, but when I watch MSNBC, it's all about Trump's lawsuits. I never see anything about Biden's accomplishments. It's Trump lawsuit, inflation, Trump lawsuit, inflation. You know what I mean? So, and Ukraine a little mixed in there. But so I think, honestly, if Biden wants to win, I'm just thinking strategically. Number one, he should be reaching out to people like you and me. You know, and you should have Biden on the show. That's not a joke. Biden should come on your show. You know, Kamala Harris should come on your show. Don't be like, oh, you know, because all of that talk that they did before about, oh, you know, some of these people are just being sexist against Kamala, black folks that don't like Kamala, it's just sexism. That's not going to fly this time. You have to go out and say what your accomplishments are, and you have to sell it. That's what politics is. You have to sell either what you did or what you're going to do, and or in most cases, both. And the Biden administration has been very bad at selling what it is that they've done. And they've made it these issues that they haven't accomplished. And
here's my take on that as we close out. I agree with you. The administration needs to sell it. But if you just do the work, just do the hard work, show that you care. And I'm not saying that the president doesn't care. I think what we're experiencing with this guy is a man who's had to make a tremendous change in thinking and attitudes over these past 2.5, 3 years. Personally, he has had to mature and to grow personally. He had to break out of the thinking that he was just, you know, having a bromance to Obama, right? He had to be the second guy to being the guy. He has had to mature in his understanding about racial and social justice, right? Like he's had to and I'm not making excuses for him, but I'm just trying to take a moment to think like, you know, what is he not getting? Because black folks got to be, we up in his face all the time. Right. We up in his face all the time. What is Kamala Harris not getting? And I think it's just because of their personal, like, conviction about these issues, right? I think President Biden is the type of man who, unless he's personally invested, unless he personally sees it or he's personally convicted in an issue, he's not going to move forward on it. He's not going to put as much gusto into it. So I think that's part of it, is that you're talking about an 80-year-old man who has gone through and have seen America over the past 60 years going through all of these changes. And now you have black activists, young black activists. You got Latino representatives. You got Muslim lawmakers. Everybody who you thought would never be at the table are at the table. Mm-hmm. And as an 80-plus-year-old man, now you are dealing with a whole new reality of what America looks like. Mm-hmm. You know what I'm saying?
Right. I mean, he's
like, part of me is just like, I mean, if you get into his just kind of, it's probably like, whoa, this thing has changed. Yeah. You got black lawmakers down in Tennessee that were expelled for simply standing for gun rights, but you know that it's racism behind it. Mm-hmm. This thing has changed for that president. Absolutely. So I think that's part of I think outside of the lack of media coverage, outside of, you know, waiting on other people, I think we're talking about waiting on President Biden to mature and to understand, Mr. President, the world has changed around you for the past 60, 70 years. It's time for you to take some stances.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And let me just say this one last thing is that I think Joe Biden, first of all, I think that he's had to evolve on a lot of things. This is the guy who said he didn't want to integrate his children into a racial jungle. Like, he said that.
Right.
I think one of the things that we need to recognize with Joe Biden and with Kamala Harris is that they're not good communicators. They are not Farajii Muhammad. They're not even Dr. Nichols. Like, they're really not good communicators. And so getting out the message is tough for them. They're going to need help. This is why they should reach out to Farajii. This is why they should reach out to me. This is why they should reach out to, you know, Roland or whoever else. This is part of it, because tell us what you're doing. Not that we have to sit there and be your cheerleaders for no money. You know what I mean? But tell us what exactly you're doing, because if not, and you're not a good communicator, which, of course, he worked in the, Obama administration. Obama was a phenomenal communicator. You know what I'm saying? Particularly when you put him at a podium, not so much one-on-one, but when you put Obama at a podium, he could sit there and tell you what happened, what he did, how he's helping. And I think even there, he needed a little bit of help. Trump, believe it or not, he may not be have the vocabulary that we expect from these kind of high-level people in our government, but he's an effective communicator. You know what I mean? And one of the things was Twitter, his bully pulpit. He was really good at tweeting, and that got his message out. That got what it was that he, what he wanted people to know. And that was a strength of his. Joe Biden is not good at Twitter. Neither are his people, and now Twitter's different. Twitter's changed.
That's
Joe
crazy.
Biden's not good at interviews. Joe Biden is not good at a podium anymore. He's not. So he really is not a strong communicator. And then you have Kamala Harris, who's also not good at those things. And then you have Karine Jean-Pierre, who's on an island by herself. So it's a struggle, but they've got to find ways to reach out to other people to make those arguments, to say, this is what Joe Biden has done for Black folks.
Yeah.
What Joe Biden needs to go into these communities and show that he's listening, not just that he's doing, saying, I think Black folks want this. I talk to these elite Black folks around me. He needs to, I would say, if I were running Joe Biden's campaign, when you go to Detroit, you're going to go to the barbershop. You know what I'm saying? We're going to get you those 3 hairs that you got on top of your head, we're going to get them trimmed. You're going to talk to Black brothers and talk about what it is you're doing for these communities.
And look, very quickly, here's and I gotta stop it after this, but if I was on the president's team, I would say, Mr. President, you need to talk to some of these Black up-and-coming lawmakers on the state level, some of these Black, vibrant, fresh voices, have a conversation with them, host them at the White House, bring some of the firebrands from all of these states from around the country, have like a conference with them, a closed-door conference, Black folks, and say, all right, let me have it. Let me have it. Let me know what I need to do. How can I galvanize you? How can I get the next vote? And look, that would be on the inside, behind closed doors, but very quickly, out in public, tell us how we can be supportive of getting these issues addressed. Give the American people a map on how they can make progress on their own. Don't tell us about the filibuster and then, we got to do the research on what the filibuster does or what the lack of filibuster does. No, you just tell us, because a lot of us don't know how government works, right? I mean, it's understandable. I'm not going to judgment on that. But tell Black folks, look, this is how I need y'all to move. This is how I'm going to move. I got these state lawmakers. I think with the 3 efforts rate moving the way we moving, I think we can get some stuff done. Like, you got to lay it out. There's no vision. And there's this expectation that he's going to run it all. He's going to control it all. And in the Black America, that's not how government works. I know some people have checked and say, that's not how politics work. That's not how government. No, government doesn't work like that. But the president is the visionary for the country. He can lay it out. He can tell us what's the best pathways for us to get our agenda met. All right, got to stop it right there. Dr. Jason Nichols, my brother. Thank you for checking in, man. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. And God willing, we'll reconnect with you next Monday.
Absolutely, my brother.
All right, peace. Yes, sir. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, let's switch gears from politics to health and wellness. We'll be checking in with our very own Dr. Bridget, MD, for this week's segment, Wellness, Reclaim Your Wellness with Dr. Bridget. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch!
real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, this difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
When you talk about blackness and what happens in Black culture, we're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it.
This is about covering us.
Invest in Black-owned media.
Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks.
We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible.
Check some money orders. Go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Welcome back to the culture here on the Black Star Network. Thank you so much for tuning in. Big shout out to my online culture crew. I see some new voices, some new names in the chat on YouTube and Facebook. Big shout out to all of you. If this is your first time, maybe this is your 10th time or 100th time, we appreciate you for joining us in the chat. And, you know, for my legacy online culture crew, they know who they are. They've been running this chat it's a well-oiled machine at this point. But let me just tell y'all, if y'all coming in the chat with some of that boo-boo, you will go to the great church of being blockatized. We can have the conversation, but once you start crossing certain lines, man, like, okay. Here's one of the things is that if you get to the name calling section, okay, have a nice day. You can exit stage left. But big shout out to all of my new watchers as we're streaming on blackstarnetwork.com and, of course, on Amazon TV. All right, folks, it's Monday, and it's time for us to talk about health and wellness. So let's get a little insight from this week's Reclaim Your Wellness with Dr. Bridget, MD. Dr. Bridget Williams, MD.
Hello.
Good afternoon, Doc. How you feeling?
Good. How are you?
I'm good. First and foremost, you've been on the move. You've been doing a lot.
Yeah.
I saw that you've been traveling. You traveled to New York City. You was at a conference and all of the good stuff. So you could talk about a lot of different things. So what's on the agenda for today?
Well, you know, we'll leave the conference. We'll leave what happens in New York stays in New York this time, right? But you know, I want to give a couple updates. Number one, you know, the story about Jamie Foxx stays in the news, and rightly so. You know, he is definitely revered and special actor and important to our community. And so far, what we understand is still he's on the mend, that he's doing better, he's talking, he's alert. There has not been any still confirmation of a stroke specifically. So I've been watching this really closely because I just think it's important information. I don't want to make any assumptions, but I also think it's really important that we inform the audience. So my understanding is that there is some relationship to high blood pressure, but I think Nick Cannon recently stated that he was awake and alert and that he was doing well. I think Martin Lawrence said something maybe a little bit before that, a couple of weeks before that, but he is getting better. But we still haven't gotten that final confirmation. And as soon as we do, I want to dig deeper into that.
So let me ask you a question, because I've been keeping myself, I've been keeping up with this story as well.
Mm-hmm.
why do you think it's so secretive? Because I feel like that adds to the rumor mill, right? Like if it's a stroke, it's a stroke. You know what I'm saying? It's not like it's an uncommon thing, especially among Black men of a certain age and everything.
Right.
So do you feel like it might be something even more serious or more severe happening here?
I've been thinking about that a lot, because why is this so difficult, right?
Right.
I also feel like he has the right to his privacy, and particularly his medical privacy.
True.
And
That's
that
true.
just because he is a well-known actor does not mean that we have the right to his personal or medical information. At the same time, I feel like, being that he is such a prominent aspect of the community, knowing what's going on with him might be able to help other people. And so, I go back and forth on it. I think it's important information. I also feel like he has the right to his privacy. So when we do find out something, we'll definitely talk about it, because I think it can be helpful, but let the man have his privacy at the same time.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. And I know one thing is when you're talking about stroke, when you're talking about high blood pressure, this is unfortunately a ongoing conversation within our community.
It is.
Of getting Black men in particular going to the doctors, getting our annual or biannual, our annual checkups, or at least getting the checkup twice a year. So, does the conversation, because it is Jamie Foxx, does it move a little bit forward? Because I've heard young men getting high blood pressure and having stroke.
Absolutely. Yes, a good friend of mine's husband died, I think, at 36 years old in his sleep from high blood pressure. And so it is something that I stay alert on, that, I'm very careful with my patients, and try to stay on top of their health, and recommend, and let's just say this, if we know nothing else, have a blood pressure machine, a cuff at your home. They used to be expensive. They're really not expensive anymore. And if you can at least stay on top of your own health, then obviously you're doing yourself and your family a favor. But yeah, it is something that we can dig deeper into and talk about how this affects us, and being salt sensitive, and all those different aspects of it. But we'll find out more soon. Hopefully that can be beneficial.
Absolutely. Look, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, we're going to have more conversation with Dr. Bridget, MD, as we talk about reclaiming your wellness. Also, post your comments and your thoughts, your questions for the doctor, so she can answer those questions as well. So still a lot to get to, so stay with us. It's The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to The Culture here on the Black Star Network. We are reclaiming our wellness with Dr. Bridget, MD, who is here to talk to us about some of our health and wellness needs. Make sure you join us in the conversation. Post your questions in our YouTube chat, Facebook chat, and we'll try to get to many questions of yours to our good doctor. Dr. Bridget, all right, so we talked a little bit about Jamie Foxx.
Yes.
What else we got that you
So,
want to bring our attention to?
Absolutely. There's if you've been going through your social media, you might be seeing an article that's coming around from a couple different sources. Cleveland Clinic, Medical News Today, many of them are talking about the fact that HPV, which is human papilloma virus, is actually directly linked and leads to a high percentage of cancer due to oral sex. And so when I started looking at this and looking at the numbers that were related, I felt it was really important to talk about. And so many women are familiar with this, but men should be familiar with this as well, that HPV is actually the most common sexually transmitted infection in the United States, which a lot of people barely even know the name of it, right? And that it is actually the leading cause of throat cancer as well, and it is spread by oral sex. So a lot of people, women might be familiar with it as far as cervical cancer and getting their pap smears on a regular basis. And that's how a lot of women have been introduced to HPV and the concept of it, as well as there being a vaccine for it. But the fact of the matter is that vaccine is available for men and women, and that it's not just cervical cancer, but it's also happening with oral cancers as well, and something that people need to be aware of. And particularly, we're in a space where there's generational differences here, right? And so if you grew up during the time of HIV and AIDS, the Generation X was very much aware of using contraception to prevent HIV and were very hypersensitive about that during that time. As we've gotten to deal with and manage HIV and AIDS so much better, you then bring in the millennials and Generation Z, and a lot of young people are not using any sort of protection whatsoever. And so I thought it was something important to talk about and for the audience to really chime in as well, because we all aren't doing the same thing, but the risk is high.
So the attitudes around oral sex has changed dramatically in this country. What is the research showing about, how it has affected how people are becoming more intimate right now? Like, what is that showing? Because I also saw, Doc, I came across some data, and I can't remember what exactly I came across, but it essentially said that high school teenagers are having less sex now than years before, that we're actually seeing that less happening on the high school level. So are we seeing like this increase in and the fascination around oral sex among college age students, young adults in their 20s and 30s? Like, who is this affecting the most at this point?
Well, what they're doing is they're looking at the number of actual sexual partners. And I do agree with you that I feel like today's high school student is learning a lot from the mistakes of the generations before. And so they tend to be a little bit more hesitant. And that despite the fact that a lot of the HPV oral cancers that are developing are due to a lack of contraception, that there was a decrease in condom purchasing during 2020 and the pandemic, what have you. The cell is actually going up, and the cell is actually going up with more of the Generation Z. So I'm going to say the millennials might be maybe in the loss here as far as getting the information, but I will say that if you've had 6 or more lifetime oral sex partners, you're 8.5 times more likely to develop oropharyngeal cancer. And so if you are taking that into consideration, and if you've not considered how to prevent this, then I think you should.
Throw that figure out there one more time, Dr. Bridget.
Okay. So if you've had 6 or more oral sex partners during your life, you're 8.5 times more likely to get oral or oropharyngeal cancer from HPV.
All right, so that's in your lifetime.
Yes.
Right? Like, people are going out with people every day, B. You know what I'm saying? Like, every day, Doc, people are hanging out. People are having, all types of relationships. That is high. I mean, that's not a hard number to get to meet. You know what I'm saying? And you're talking about a lifetime.
Yeah. And 70% of these of oropharyngeal cancer is actually caused by HPV. So I think I think when I was growing up or just, as far as generalizations, I figured, if you have, an oral cancer, I thought about tobacco, I thought about excessive alcohol use, and that can actually play into it. But 70% of those are actually caused by HPV.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow.
And
all right, go ahead. I'm sorry, Doc.
And I was like, consider the fact that 10% of men and 3.6% of women will have oral HPV. A lot of that has to do with homosexual sex and encounters. But there's a way to avoid this. And I think that's another part of this conversation.
Does that go along with, and I know we about to go. I'm going to go there a little bit. So crew, y'all ready for this? Doc, you ready? How does that play into the down low culture that we see?
That's what that is, right? So with 10% of men and 3.6% of women that have oral HPV, keep in mind, not all HPV causes cancer, right? So this is, but
when you're down there, you're not down there with no microscope.
No, not really. You're not getting the paperwork.
You know what I'm saying? If you engage in that type of activity, you're not asking those type of questions. You know what I'm saying?
No, but maybe you should.
Yeah.
I mean, is that not what we talk about? We talk about the fact that you should be asking questions. And the problem is, if you're asking questions, it doesn't mean everyone is always honest. But if they're not honest, then what are you doing to protect yourself?
All right, I'm gonna stop right there, because I want to make sure we get some of our crew into this conversation.
Mm-hmm.
Sandy, you kicked this off. You said when we're talking about young people having less sex, high school students having less sex, Sandy, you said probably because they see how screwed up the adults are referring to sex. Do you think that's one of the big factors? And I think that brings up a great point, Sandy, that adults, we have made sex such a big thing. And I'm saying, I guess, generationally, if we're talking about the generation of Freaknik, if we're talking about the generation of growing up where popular culture is hypersexualized, have we made it such a big thing that now it's that level of emphasis has not visited on the children? Like, how do you look at that?
I would like to say that this younger generation looks at what their parents and their older siblings have done or what have you, and are making better choices. But I'm not buying that. I'll be honest. I really think the problem, or I should say, I think the reason why high school students appear to be making better choices is because of this. They're sitting, they don't relate with one another. If you're sitting up on the phone all day, right? If you're sitting in your home, people don't go outside. They're not, they've dealt with COVID. They didn't necessarily go to the same amount of social interactions that, other generations have done because they were stuck and they're on. But if you don't have the social skills, and if your way of socializing, interacting with your peers is texting or Snapchat, that is probably the safest sex you're going to have.
Oh yeah, I get it. But it's just interesting because, and we got to take another pause, but it's just really interesting because you're saying like we should have conversations. I remember having a conversation about the importance of having conversations when my teacher was having conversations back in middle school.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's always been the kind of antidote to STDs and everything.
Mm-hmm.
Is to talk to your potential partner. And it's so crazy. It's so crazy, Doc, that we are living in a time where as much as people are kind of going through, are very fluid with their intimacy,
mm-hmm.
that we just don't have these conversations. We do accept on face value if a person says, I haven't been with anyone for 6 months or 3 months.
Right.
We're like, okay, cool.
But
I think there's another conversation that people start to ask, like, Well, let me see your papers. Let me, give me some proof. Show me that you aren't lying to me. And then that undercuts the trust of what you're trying to build. I think that's how some people think. That's anyway.
But at the same time, despite the fact that the condom sales are going up a little bit, 4.4%. Okay.
Yeah.
I do think that there's a younger generation that is like, what, HIV? We can solve that. Herpes, you can take enough antivirals to keep it at bay.
Yep.
Like, I don't think they have the same fear of STD that we did in generations past.
That's true.
And so
I agree with that. I would agree with
why ruin the moment by asking a bunch of uncomfortable questions, I think is what ends up happening. And the fact of the matter is, if you have to ask too many questions, maybe you shouldn't be there, right?
All right, I'm going to stop you right there. I got to take a quick pause because you're getting into it. Look, folks, stay with us. We're talking to Dr. Bridget. We're talking about reclaiming your wellness. Post your comments, share your thoughts, and of course, ask your questions as we have this conversation about HPV, oral sex, and so much more. You're tuned into The Culture here on the Black Star Network.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
Black Star Network is here.
Oh, no punch! I'm real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
About reclaiming your wellness with Dr. Bridget, MD. As we've had this conversation, and folks, it's been a fascinating conversation as Dr. Bridget has been breaking down some of the latest data and some of the latest reports and research and statistics around how HPV have led to cancer and to some other medical issues. I want to bring my sister back into the frame. Davey Floater said, Davey, you said one night stands post-COVID is nasty work. I think that people are just over, Davey, as Dr. Bridget mentioned, that we already are so far along with addressing HIV, addressing some of these other major STDs and some of these other complications due to unhealthy sex, that people are like, you know what? I mean, I can pop a pill. I can visit the doctor. I can get a cream for that. I can do whatever I need to, to recover from a situation like that. I'll take a little time away from people, and then once I recover, I'm back into the game. I think that's a very real assumption. And I think that a lot of 20 to 30 and 40-year-olds, I'm saying from 20 to 40-year-olds, are thinking like that now. Like, man, if I can live through COVID, I can get through anything. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. And so, like, a little bit away from the HPV conversation, but 2.5 million cases of chlamydia, gonorrhea, and syphilis in 2021. That is doubling in the past 2 decades. So there are 2.5 million of those infections in 2021. And that's doubling what we had in the past 2 decades, which shows that there is really a generational shift, because at this point, chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis, people consider them treatable blips on the
it still doesn't carry the same stigma, because I know back in the day, if you had any STD, that your name was trash, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of anything. Like if a person knew you had an STD, it was like, oh my God. Like if your partner gave you an STD, you would just walk away. There would be no conversation. I don't think that's the case nowadays. I think people are like, which STD? You know what I'm saying? Versus I have an STD. Oh, this person's gone.
Right.
Am I wrong in thinking that?
No, I totally agree with you. And even, even how you end up getting tested for them has changed. And I think that makes even a bigger difference because maybe about 10 years ago or so, if you wanted to get tested for any of these, it was a very uncomfortable situation for a man that involved a tiny Q-tip and you were not happy. Let me say it like that, right? Now you pee in a cup, just like, not a big deal. Oh, it's positive. You get treated, your life goes on. And so I think when the stigma changes and there's more confidence in the treatment, how we look at, they consider this no different. And I've heard people say this, it's no different from getting a cold.
Why? Wait a minute. What's no different from getting a cold?
Chlamydia, gonorrhea, syphilis. Like some.
Is that true? I never had it, so I can't.
I think that's the way some people look at it now. That just like you can catch, a regular cold from anyone around you, drinking from their cup, sneezing, whatever, people look at these infections now no different from that. Easy to treat, like it's like strep throat. You treat it, you move on.
I get that part.
Yeah.
I get that. But I've also learned that there are, quote unquote, and I'm using this term loosely, minor STDs and major STDs. But that's not, culturally, that's not how STDs were presented from us. I think a lot of us, especially those who are in the 30s, 40s, I would say those of us in our 40s and older, that we remember how the 80s and the 90s burned into our brains, Dr. Bridget. Like any STD means one or two things. You're going to be super sick or you're going to die. You know what I'm saying? And at that time, it's like now there are different conversations. We have more resources. We have, better research and all of the good stuff. But I think a lot of us are still like, either once I get an STD, my life is over.
Right. I mean, I've had many people just devastated and crying in my office because of any one of these diagnoses, right?
Right, sure.
So as things change, and it's inevitably changing, we really do need to talk about being safe, right?
Right.
So first of all, how would you know if you did have oropharyngeal HPV? And you might not have any symptoms whatsoever. So again, you can ask all the questions you want. It doesn't mean that someone's able to give you any information, but you might have a very long-lasting sore throat. You could have earaches, you might become hoarse. Swollen lymph nodes is probably something that I would definitely keep that aware because it can be uncomfortable and tender, and a lot of people kind of blow it off and it's only getting worse. You have pain with swallowing, and God forbid you end up having unexplained and unexpected weight loss. And if those things are happening, clearly you need to go in and be seen and have a conversation with your doctor.
Absolutely. All right, let me go to a couple of the crew members here. Janelle, my sister, you said, I've heard that HPV may be so commonly transmitted that many seasoned adults may assume that they have had it. Is that true?
So it can be. Now, keep in mind, not all HPV is cancer causing, right? So it can be a virus that many people have and there's no symptoms. It's just something that you're living with and doesn't cause complications. The concern is when that, if you have one of the strains of HPV, that can be more life-threatening.
Okay. All right, let me keep going to the chat. Sharon, you said preparing our young women and men, these are the conversations that they need to have. First, what is your health status? Next, when is the last time you got checked? And third, what is your credit score?
Not necessarily in that order.
Health, money. That's just
not in that order.
I'm going through that. What's your health status? Oh, okay. When you got checked. Okay, lastly, hold on. I know. Stop it. Your credit score. 504.
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry, sir.
Yeah.
But I mean, are those the type of questions like when do you have that conversation, Doc?
Are we on the credit score?
Yeah, I just want not the credit score part. I mean, that's another part of the conversation. But but like when do you have those conversations? Because you know, sometimes people say I did have that conversation right before the moment happens. But do you have those conversations when you first meet somebody? Like the way people are moving nowadays, it's like when do you have those conversations?
Absolutely. So I don't recommend doing that in the moment. That's uncomfortable, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. So but I do think that just like when you're hopefully getting to know someone, right? And that you're spending time with them and having conversations. And if you're asking, hey, where are you from? And tell me about your family. And to be honest, if you're adult enough to be having sex, then you should be asking not only, when's the last time you've been checked or, what is your health status, but you should be having a healthy conversation about what your sexual appetite is. We're not all the same. Okay. And so if you're willing to say, this is how I express myself and this is what I like, and you're able to share that information as well, then you're having a very transparent conversation where you can also easily say, hey, when's the last time you had any testing? If you are avoiding that depth of conversation, if you cannot say my sexual preferences are, then you should not be delving into places that you shouldn't be.
I think that's absolutely true. I think that's true whether you're in your single life, whether you are in a committed relationship, or whether you're married. I think that is absolutely true, because that level of communication, you know what I'm saying? Like having that level of communication, being open enough and strong enough to check in with your partner and say, hey, this is my preferences, or this has been my history, these have been my experiences. Can you handle that?
Mm-hmm.
And then ask the question, those conversations. But I do agree that there should be some set aside time. There's no way in the world that you're getting to know somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And then once the conversation about intimacy comes up, because it does come up, that you're not asking these questions. I can't, it's hard for me to believe that somebody says, I went from meeting somebody to jumping in bed with somebody, and you didn't have an opportunity to have these questions. It's hard for me to wrap my head around that. Like there had to be some type of warming up that had to happen that those conversations could be had.
Conversations about your health status or conversations about your preferences?
Conversations about your health status and conversation about your preference.
I believe if you can have a conversation about preferences, then it's not hard to say health status. I don't think that's difficult. But if you are not talking about preference, if you're not talking, then it probably is difficult to ask about what your health status is. So I highly recommend if you're not comfortable enough to talk about what you like and what they like, and if we are even compatible in that sense, then you shouldn't be doing, and you shouldn't be what you doing. You shouldn't be doing this, right? And so we need to normalize that conversation on both ends, because a lot of people, like you were saying, whether it's married, committed, one night, whatever it is that you do, if you cannot have intimate conversation, you are not in an intimate relationship. I don't care what you do in bed. If you cannot be intimate in your communication, it's not for you.
That's a word right there. That is a word. If you can't have an intimate conversation, you're not in an intimate relationship. Woo!
100%. Yeah. Okay, but let me tell you this. All
right, go ahead. We got a couple of seconds left.
Because we're in it, right? So now, how are we preventing the situation? Okay, because I will tell you right now that it is more likely that Black men and women are to become positive for HPV and oral cancer, as well as cervical cancer. Okay. It is also, we're less likely to get the vaccine. Is it because we're refusing it or because it's never offered to us? And like I said, 70% of these oral cancers are caused by HPV. So even if you are choosing not to get the vaccine, someone should at least be having a conversation with you, and you should be having every opportunity as everyone else. And so when we're talking about prevention now, it does go back to the vaccine. This is difficult because the vaccine usually starts with your smaller children, ages 9 to 14 years old. And usually it's a 2-dose series. And that's a hard thing sometimes for some parents to face, that they're having their child vaccinated for a sexually transmitted virus, basically, right? But if you miss that cutoff and you are now obviously an adult, there is a 3-dose series for ages really 15 to 45 years old. The problem is, and you're asked, why does it stop at 45, or they really want everyone to be vaccinated by 26 years old, is because it's not what you have done today. It's what you were probably doing 10 years ago or earlier. That's why children get vaccinated early, because they're hopefully not sexually active at that time, and it will decrease the likelihood of them ever becoming positive for HPV. But if you're already 45 and older, you might get the vaccination, but it might not prevent the cancer itself. Otherwise, use condoms, use dental dams, watch your alcohol and tobacco consumption, because they can cause oral cancer by themselves. But if you drink heavily, smoke heavily, it increases the likelihood that HPV will grow into a full cancer.
Wow. There it is. Look, Sharon checked in. Sharon Brooks said, "Doctor, this is awesome. Thank you for the clarification that men can also get the vaccine as well. My daughter was recommended for taking the shot before she went to college. Pediatricians are recommending it." That's heavy. In 30 seconds, talk to us about, like in Sharon's case, she said her daughter was recommended to take it before college. Talk to us about the pros and cons of making that decision.
So when you're talking, we're always a little concerned about vaccinations. Obviously, it's been a huge conversation the last couple of years. The fact of the matter is, when you're talking about side effects from this vaccine, it is more just skin, shot, irritation, redness from the actual site that you're getting injected into, more than any real issues with the vaccine itself. And so as far as making that recommendation, I would recommend that our younger children and our high school and college kids get vaccinated. The earlier, the better. And that's a really difficult one, but I do recommend that.
Absolutely. Dr. Bridget, MD, always a pleasure. You always keeping it real with us. How can folks check in with you? How can they follow you? And when is your next after chat, Doc?
We are after chatting tonight, 5:30 Eastern, so we can continue this conversation, as well as come and we can talk about the other topics that we've been discussing over the last few weeks. So I'm always excited to do that. Go to Dr. Bridget MD on Instagram, and we'll do an Instagram live, and I'm happy to have you cam up and let's talk.
There it is right there, Dr. Bridget MD. You can find her here on The Culture every Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time with her Reclaim Your Wellness conversation. Dr. Bridget, thank you so much for being so good for The Culture, and we'll check in with you later on this evening.
Absolutely. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, folks, we got to take a quick pause. When we come forward, got to talk to you about a big day it is today. Stay with us. That conversation is up next here on The Culture on the Black Star Network.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jackie Hood Martin, and I have a question for you. Ever feel as if your life is teetering and the weight and pressure of the world is consistently on your shoulders? Well, let me tell you, living a balanced life isn't easy. Join me each Tuesday on Black Star Network for A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie. We'll laugh together, cry together, pull ourselves together, and cheer each other on. So join me for new shows each Tuesday on Black Star Network, A Balanced Life with Dr. Jackie.
Black Star Network is here.
A real revolutionary right now.
Thank you for being the voice of Black America.
All momentum we have now, we have to keep this going.
The video looks phenomenal.
See, there's a difference between Black Star Network and Black-owned media and something like CNN.
You can't be Black-owned media and be scared.
It's time to be smart.
Bring your eyeballs home.
You dig?
All right, folks, welcome back to the show. Welcome. For our final conversation, or at least acknowledgement, I wanted to give a big shout out to workers all across the globe, as today is a day for International Workers' Day. Let me share with you a little bit about what that means, folks. Take a look at this. International Workers' Day. This is a day where workers across, and let's put that first quote up on here, screening, please. Workers across the world are in the streets for May Day rallies marking International Workers' Day. In France, unions say 1 million people could march as part of ongoing protests against President Macron's pension reforms. In Turkey and Pakistan, authorities have blocked some rallies in public places. South Korea saw tens of thousands of people turn out for this largest May Day gathering since the pandemic started. This is coming from democracynow.org, as folks are in the streets and are advocating for better pay, better wages, better conditions for workers. And so here in America, if you are participating in any type of May Day rally, if you are a worker that has been doing the work, you've been advocating for, on the behalf of your union, today is your day. And I find it to be very, very interesting as I'm growing, especially in my political philosophy, the importance of organizing, the importance of having unions, of having people to move in an organized manner to get what needs to be done for the betterment of the whole. And so I'm just giving a big shout out to those workers, especially across the globe. We know that a lot of these work conditions are influenced because of systems of oppression, systems of racism and white supremacy, systems of greed where profit stands over people, systems of production at the expense of human beings. These type of conditions do not move the globe any further along in a sense of forward progress. And we can talk about it here in America. We could talk about the factory workers. We could talk about the many laborers. We could talk about those who have contributed to this country as being a quote unquote an American worker, how important their role is in building up the infrastructure of this country, in building up the systems of this country, and more importantly, in creating a society that we can all benefit from. So big shout out to the international workers across the globe. Big shout out to the workers here in this country. Big shout out to unions who are speaking and advocating on behalf of better work conditions for their members. Now, as we talk about that part, I'm keeping my eyes out. And folks, I think this is just one of those little things that, it's culturally relevant, but I just think it's an interesting, fascinating topic, which is what's going on with the Writer Guild of America, the WGA. If you haven't heard, the Writers Guild of America right now is possibly preparing for a major strike with studios all throughout Hollywood, where writers are saying that they're going to be putting their pens and pencils down for better wages. They're going to be putting their pens and pencils down for getting more money for the content that they produce. The content, a couple of things. They're looking at these major production companies, TV and film show, production companies, Paramount and Fox and all of these big groups, and saying, look, your films are making millions upon millions to billions of dollars, and we're getting pennies as a result of that. Content that we have created, content that we have developed. And so I stand with writers. I stand with writers to make sure that they're telling our story, because a lot of the content that we're seeing on TV that we love, that we're praising, the stuff that shapes the culture, come out of the mind of us, particularly and especially Black men and women who don't have the resources behind them. As y'all know, Nira, my wife, has been dealing with, as a writer, director, one of the big things that her and I often talk about is the fact that there aren't a lot of Black women. There aren't enough Black women in the writer's room. There aren't enough Black men to tell our story. The story doesn't have to just be told in a news format. The stories can be told through the medium of film, the medium and the storytelling of television cameras, and telling our story in a different way. So, I hope that they can find a deal that is going to be suitable and beneficial for writers across this country. But their deadline is today at 12 o'clock. If they do not make a deal with this Alliance of Motion Pictures, and I'm talking about the WGA, then they are talking about at 12:01 tomorrow, they are going on strike. The last major strike that we saw of this magnitude happened back in 2007 through 2008, where writers decided to put their pens and pencils down for 100 days, and it cost the city of Los Angeles over $1.2 billion in revenue because LA was not getting the permits, not making these shows, not doing what it has been doing, and it has come to a great cost to productions, and more importantly, has come to a great cost to our culture and our storytelling. So it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this situation plays out. But again, I stand with the writers to make sure that they get their fair share. It sucks that if you're a writer and you're getting $40,000 or $50,000 and what you wrote garners millions upon millions, your story, your ideas, your character garners millions upon millions of dollars, and then you get no money on the back end. You just get your paycheck while the studios are eating, all of this profit, And so when we're talking about changing the culture or changing the game, that means it's in front of the camera, but then you're talking about also behind the camera, and more importantly, behind the typewriter or behind the computer rather, making sure that we get our fair share. Because it's nothing like telling your story only for somebody to make a profit off of it instead of you. That hurts. All right, folks. So just a couple of things as we celebrate International Workers' Day. All right, folks, I appreciate y'all for checking in today. Big shout out to my very special guest, our contributor, Dr. Jason Nichols, to our doctor, our resident doctor, Dr. Bridget, MD. Make sure y'all follow them on all social media. Go to our website today. Show your support and your love at blackstarnetwork.com, blackstarnetwork.com. Your support means everything to us. And so if we can get your support, we can continue to expand, to grow this platform that we call this Black digital media space in a very, very big way. So go to blackstarnetwork.com. Make sure you download the app for free on all of your devices. Follow us, share the content. And here's the big thing, folks. Give something to sustain this Black media platform. You can give something on our website, and your donations will help make a difference on how we tell our story and, more importantly, how we present it to the rest of the world. Also, while you're there, make sure you follow us on social media at Black Star Network. We would love to connect with you on Facebook, on Instagram, and Twitter. And also, you can follow yours truly, me. You see my picture up there. All of my shows have been logging. We do so many shows. You might say, like, what about this show and this show? I missed this show. We have done so many shows since we've been on the air for over the past year and a half. So it's really been a blessing to have a place that we can go, a central space that we can go to look at some of those old classic and archive shows. But you can follow me at The Real Farajii on Instagram, Farajii on Twitter. Love to build with you, love to connect with you, love to add you to the crew of great watchers and supporters of us as we do this great, great work. All right. Stay tuned. Up next, 6 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, my big brother, Brother Roland Martin. He has been moving around. He went to a jazz festival. He hung out with his dad for his birthday. Big shout out to the great father of our brother, Brother Roland Martin. So big shout out, Dad. I hope you enjoyed your birthday, and so much has happened. And make sure y'all check us out. Follow me on social media. Follow Brother Roland and all of your favorite voices here on Black Star Network. And let's continue to move this process forward. All right, that's going to do it for me. As always, never be afraid to challenge what's wrong, stand for what's right while being yourself in the process. God willing, we will talk tomorrow with another exciting edition of The Culture right here, exclusively here, only here on the Black Star Network. Talk to you soon, family. Have a great afternoon, evening. Peace.